Welcome everybody to our webinar on governance in depth for the multi-cloud. And we're going to focus around security and compliance governance and talk about our best practices that we have delivered to the market. And it's getting a very interesting space where people are now struggling with understanding how to do risk management. Welcome everybody to our webinar on governance in depth for the multi-cloud. And we're going to focus around security and compliance governance and talk about our best practices that we have delivered to the market. And it's getting a very interesting space where people are now struggling with understanding how to do risk management, how to prioritize which areas to fix first, and then security tools always quite a few. And so how do we consolidate all of our findings and be able to prioritize on our security posture and improve on that? So those are the areas we're going to discuss. So again, welcome, and it's a very exciting space, as I said earlier. Okay, so what are we going to learn today? We're going to focus on an area called defense in depth, which is a topic that's fairly well known in the security space. I'm sure you guys know already. We will drill it down, but we're going to put on the lens for public cloud. And how do we do governance, risk, and compliance for the public cloud? And how do we deliver accountability and security posture across the board in a very quick, simplistic manner? I mean, that's really the goal. And we also going to get into the multi-cloud security governance framework, and that framework it's going to be around 6 specific steps which you can take to actually deliver this very quickly for your organization. So we're actually going to walk you through it. And we're also going to walk you through the full implementation cycle of that as well. How you can create this expert system quickly, either scripting internally or ideally leveraging external tools. And we're going to spend about 5 minutes at the tail end for our Cloudnosys security and compliance platform. Then we'll get into Q&A session. So just quick housekeeping, we are recording this session. You will get a copy of it. And so with that, we're going to kick it off. We like to keep the session interactive. So definitely go ahead and ask me questions during the presentation, and I'll try to best answer it, okay? All right, so my name is Kamran Mehboob, for just introductions, and I'm the Director of Product Management here at Cloudnosys. We're a company that's been in existence for about 5 years now, focusing on security and compliance for the multi-cloud, solving this governance and risk and capabilities, and making sure that we can set the right guardrails and provide this end-to-end process for controlling security and helping you prioritize where to remediate and why you should be remediating certain systems sooner than later. Another quick point, we have a fairly cool new, just came out in 2021, multi-cloud security governance best practice ebook. A lot of topics that I'll be talking about here are documented in this ebook, and it's also a fairly detailed out. So highly recommend you download that either from our website, or you can go to our LinkedIn page and grab it from there. So love to hear your feedback on that. Okay, so why we should care about governance? We seems to be, I guess, running multiple tools, and everybody seems to be doing their job. Why governance, and what is that going to give us? Well, first of all, it's going to improve your efficacy rate. You could be, you could be secure, but the question is, are you effective? Are you efficient? And so improve efficacy around all the tooling that you have in place. And think about it, most organizations are now globally dispersed, especially with this new economy in place that everybody's remote. And now a lot of companies are going into public cloud. As a matter of fact, Gartner were saying About 70% of the companies are now public cloud or will be public cloud very soon. Most of us probably in the next 2 years or less. So the next thing is to measure and understand your risk posture. Why we need to understand the risk associated with our security process. Well, so you can prioritize. Certain things may be low risk, other things may be high risk. And why is that important? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have thousands of alerts. And how do you manage that? How do you effectively remediate? So you need to put the best investment in the right place. And that's going to help you reduce costs. So again, prioritizing investment and reducing costs. So those are some of the key things why you should have governance in place. And pretty much everybody is worried about privacy of data and protecting data. So every industry is now affected. So we need to have some form of risk management process in place. And these are some of the common areas where if you have lack of governance in place for your multi-cloud environment, even for a single cloud for that matter, these are the kind of things that you're going to see in terms of policy violations. And that's going to create a breach in your environment. I mean, everything from IAM policies to security groups to data store rules to things like simple things, encryption in transit, disabled, right? So lots of issues going on in lots of companies that we talk to, and so we're helping them recognize this even more and trying to educate the market that you need some form of governance. It doesn't have to be extensive, but you need to start somewhere. Um, when we ask people, why these things happen, and 64% of the times they say, well, it's human error. We're just in a hurry. DevOps guys are doing their thing, and sometimes production rollouts, we go at a pace of internet to get new patches in place and get going. And
Production
sometimes we
rollouts.
don't have all the controls in
We,
place,
we,
or maybe
we
few
go
controls
at a
got
pace
missed.
of internet
And
to get new
so
patches in place
54% of
and
the
get
folks says,
going.
well, that's
And
because of lack of
sometimes we don't
team
have all the
awareness.
controls in place, or
Team
maybe a few
awareness of
controls got
security
missed. And
and
so
policies.
54% of
And
the
that could
folks
be
says, well,
education, that
that's
could be
because of
very well
lack of
that
team
things aren't
awareness.
communicated well, or
Team
that
awareness of security.
the tooling, security tooling is changing rapidly, or folks are changing rapidly, that certain things are not being implemented appropriately. So the net result we see why this happened is because there is no what is called policy as code. So there's no point, telling people what to do in a document or a Word file or or some side script. You have to have your security policies as code, and that code should be monitored and executed pretty much in real time. The first one, as I mentioned, human error. Human error happens because there's a lot of manual intervention sometimes, or that they don't know, and that's because there's no automation in place. The last item is lack of adequate control and oversight. What's causing these misconfigurations? Keep in mind that cloud is lots of volume, velocity, and had a lot of variety of data, and it's also disparity. The data is all over the place. So all of that combined with these three areas of lack of adequate controls and oversight, you're going to have these kinds of misconfiguration, vulnerabilities, and so on. And really, that's because of lack of governance. There's very little of it, or there's no governance at all in place. So that's the business case for governance. Now, let's dive into this concept called defense in depth. Okay. Now, it's a very well-known concept in the security space. If you were to Google that, you're going to get like millions of articles. And it really talks about how to protect your data and application, which is at the top of the pyramid. And it starts at the very bottom around, policies, procedure, process, physical, perimeter, and it has all these different layers, of course, right? This model, although it's somewhat valid, but it's not entirely valid because let's face it, do you have a physical data center? Now we're talking about the cloud now. The answer is no. Well, do you have a perimeter? Well, not really. Our perimeter is just a virtual private cloud (VPC), or our perimeter is the IAM rule that defines who has access to it. Okay, or network tables. So all of that is changing in the cloud. So we have to change with it. So how do we deliver this defense in depth process for the cloud? And in kind of simplicity, these four things that you see on your left hand side, I'll just kind of highlight that here with the highlighter, right here. So this is talking about, what if instead of boiling the ocean, what if we just took 20 policies for each layer, and not only that for each layer, but also for each service within that layer, and just make sure that we enforce it. And after we enforce it, we can have a lot of findings, and then from that we will prioritize based on a risk rating model and remediate, and also be able to ideally map that to a compliance framework as well. Sounds pretty straightforward, but let us dive in a bit more into that. And that's what we're going to talk about. That how do we create this governance, risk, and compliance for this entire stack for your cloud environment fairly quickly by using some simple things. Okay, so first of all, just a definition. What we see as a definition for the governance in depth for the public cloud. So there are three core areas. You have to have, discovery and visibility, and control and audit. Okay, discovery is all about understanding what you have running and how is it configured, and if those configurations are correct or not, and what is the degree of risk for those configurations. Is it high, medium, or low risk rating on those configurations? Okay, and then be able to map that to a control framework, whether it's NIST or ISO and so on. And then once you have that visibility and control, then it goes into audit to make sure that is it being enforced, and if it is being enforced, then you're definitely going to have findings, and those findings have to be remediated, right? So our definition is for governance in depth for public cloud is cloud security governance is really a set of processes that ensures that all security policies are formally managed and mapped to a framework in near real time. Now, what this means near real time? Near real time means that you have to have everything analyzed really on a minute by minute basis as things change in the cloud. Because as you know, cloud is all about changes in real time. We have a ephemeral environment. Okay, so what is this process? What is this new process of cloud governance, and how we can deliver it quickly and be able to see some real results in 2021? So again, I'm going to repeat the definition earlier, which I said was cloud security governance is a set of processes that ensures all security policies are formally managed and mapped to a framework in real time. Okay, tracked and managed in real time. So there are 6 steps that are involved, and I want you to consider these 6 steps because this could have a dramatic impact for you in 2021 for your security posture analysis. So what if you took top 20 security controls for each layer of security tool and for each cloud service? Okay, so for example, I'm running S3 as a service, right? Uh, in AWS. And so I need to know what are the top 20 security rules for S3. And I'm going to manage it, I'm going to run it, I'm going to ensure as a step 2 that I'm going to ensure that they're active and they're being enforced. Okay, that's important. So pick 20 that make sure they're active and they're enforced. The third one is if it's active and enforced, then it's going to create findings because you'll be running scans, you'll be running your scripts, and it's going to generate findings. Okay, you need to consolidate these findings from these scans. And the consolidation is not just for that S3 bucket, but also let's say you're running an EC2 instance of compute and you want to know the state of that VM. Okay, so again, there's going to be a third-party tool we'll be running, whether it's Tenable or Qualys or different tools that will generate the findings for that VM at the OS level and at the host level. Again, you need to pick top 20 and pull those findings and be able to consolidate them. Okay. The fourth step is once you have all the findings, you need to grade them, whether it's high, medium, or low, from a risk rating perspective, right? Now you don't have to do that every time. You just have to do it one time. That if the security bucket is open, then I'm going to make the security rating finding to be high. That is, the risk is high. Okay. If the bucket is closed, I'm going to make the risk rating low. So using this approach, you can actually grade your findings, right? So once you're done with that, then the last most important or equally important thing is to be able to map those controls, those 20 security controls for each service, into a compliance regulation of your choice. We suggest you should use NIST or ISO 27001 because that's where the market is going at the moment. Okay, so now you have done that, then the last most important thing is, and this is where you're going to have a paradigm shift in your thinking, where security has been historically a centralized model. Okay, we need to get away from that. From a cloud governance perspective, from a cloud perspective, in the new world, we have to disseminate the findings to each application owner, which means we have to decentralize security. Yes, there's certain security policies will still be centralized because you do want to manage them because they're very high risk, but you don't have to manage everything. You can push it downstream. You can shift left. You can assign it to those folks and be able to reduce your workloads significantly because you're not gonna remediate 1,000 findings, okay? But if you were to disseminate the 10 application teams, each team will have 100. They can prioritize and probably get 10, 15, 20, 30 done fairly quickly. So think about this process. So if I were to summarize this entire webinar in one slide, this would be the slide. And you should be setting a new year resolution. And you should say to yourself, I'm going to achieve this year. I'm going to start this now, okay? This 6th step, take 20 security controls for each service, for each tool, and make sure it's active and enforced, okay? It will generate findings. You're going to take these findings and map it to a risk rating table, okay? That's a one-time event. And then I'm going to map it to a compliance regulation. That's also a one-time event. You only do it one time because the rest is repeatable. And then I'm going to push this out to the application owners based on service tags which are on the cloud environment. Okay, so hopefully you guys got that because it's a pretty important concept, because after that I'm going to show you how to implement this and which tools you should be using to make this happen. Okay, folks ask that, okay, can you help us prioritize which areas we should be focusing on from a cloud security policy perspective? Well, these are the main ones. Obviously, access control is very important. Logging is very important. Making sure that your settings and configurations on all cloud services are correct, and that you are monitoring those, right? Kubernetes engine configurations. So there's about like 35 security controls now from CIS for the Kubernetes. Definitely follow those. Host and operating system vulnerabilities, right? So we need to make sure that we capture those as well and prioritize. And like I said, every single cloud service configurations needs to be tracked. It doesn't matter what you're using. If you're using Elastic or Glue or something else, you have to keep track of all of those configurations. Okay, then we jump into network and IOC and hash grading. This is more of a capturing those events and making sure that you do a holistic analysis. So let's talk about tool chain a bit, right? Security is a pretty tough thing, as you guys know, and defense in depth requires that you got to have security monitoring in each layer of the defense in depth triangle, which I showed earlier. So everything from configuration management to operating system and host to log management, automations, and monitoring your database with PII, and of course having access to security policies and frameworks. So if you look at AWS, Azure, and GCP, they all provide some tools to manage this process. So for host and operating system hardening, AWS has something called AWS Inspector. You can check that out. It's actually practically almost free. And Azure has Azure Security Center, and GCP has Security Command Center. And of course, obviously, many folks have third-party tooling always in place. So they have Tenable, Qualys, Nessus, and there's different products there. So as you can see pretty quickly that let's just say if you're only in AWS or Azure only or GCP only, right? You still have 3 or 4 tools running just within the cloud environment alone. Plus you have probably 2 or 3 or 4 tools running, which are vendor tools running on top of GCP. Okay, so imagine if you go multi-cloud. I mean, you're looking at 5 or 6 tools per cloud vendor, and very soon you can get out of hand, and you can see very quickly why you need governance, why you need guardrails, okay, to drive this process, and why you need risk management process, and why you need what is called remediation prioritization. Okay, we go to companies and they say, "Hey, you guys are using CIS?" I say, "Yeah, we are." And we say, "Okay, well, how's it going?" And they say, "Well, the scores are very low." And we say, "Well, why they're low?" Well, that's because it's very hard to remediate and find things because there's just too many of them. So basically, what they're saying is that we don't have governance, we don't have we don't have a remediation prioritization process in place. They have some governance, which is through CIS at the starting point, but just because you turn on something and you have low scores and you're not doing anything about it, that's just telling you that you're not doing your job, and as far as we can see. So moving forward, if you were to consolidate all those tools, it should look like this. Okay, so you'll have buckets like network, host, application, infrastructure configuration, CI/CD pipeline, and IAM. Okay, you're going to have different tools from different vendors, and your job is to be able to basically synthesize all this and create a risk grading program and be able to create policy gap analysis through this and be able to do what is called prioritization or remediation through automation. Okay, this is what we do at Cloudnosys, by the way. So we have a platform that does this. It can ingest all this together. It can organize and create this prioritization, risk reports, and of course, automation is a huge piece of this. So, what are the 3 key areas to reach scale on governance? The 3 key principles are you have to have visibility and speed and self-healing. So I'll talk about a little bit more on this. Visibility, not just understanding, hey, we know what our inventory is. We have an asset list. No. Yeah, you have an asset list, but do you have a risk rating on each of the assets? That, hey, I have 800 S3s and 100 of them are high risk security configurations are on them. And so that's what we mean by visibility. You need to know right down to which cloud service is at high risk. And the only way you're going to know that, as I said, if you take your top 20 security policies and rank them high, medium, and low, so when you do scan, you know what you're getting at. Speed, meaning it's got to be real time, okay? We're in a real time world now. Everything is instant, and so we need to have it in real time. Self-healing really means that you can't humanly possibly fix things manually anymore. You have to have automation, and the only way you're going to have automation is you have to have some kind of a pre-built uh, workflows. So if something happens, okay, what actions are we going to take, and how are we going to take them, in which order, and who are the people that are involved. So all of that needs to be in place. So if you came to me and said, look, this is all great, but my budget is zero, and I really have, very little time, but governance is important to me. How do I start this? Where do I enforce the policy? And in addition, try to understand these risks. So I would say follow these 5 steps, which is number one, go and implement CIS controls as a starting point. Okay, go turn it on in your cloud environment. At least you know what the scores are. But don't stop there. You have to go to NIST 800 or ISO security frameworks. Why? Because CIS is very basic. It's not going to help you with all the security policies that are needed to implement, especially if you move towards compliancy and privacy laws. Like compliancy means like HIPAA, PCI, and GDPR, and so on. And it's certainly if you want to be ISO compliant, then CIS is not enough. Okay, number two is you need to write your own rules. You need to write your own policy, and it has to be as code that can be executed. Okay, so for example, checking if the multi-factor authentication is on for root account, that's a security policy. Automation, I keep talking about. Without automation, you can't do this. So you have to have automation in place, and you have to write scripts for automation or invest in tools in this area. And fourth is, as I said earlier, turn on your cloud vendor security tools. They're actually not too bad, but they do produce a lot of findings and they are disjointed. But that's okay because now you know what you need to work on. Fifth is where you're going to get somewhere. You have to consolidate these findings and you have to build a risk prioritization process from all of that. Because if you don't, you're going to have a bunch of tools running, a bunch of teams running around, and you won't have an understanding or any standardization around what's happening in your network, who is responsible, and what is the prioritization, what is our risk on those. Okay, so keep that in mind. CIS, most of you probably already know this because CIS has been around about 3 years, still fairly new, but still getting very popular. So for the AWS environment, they have 44 security controls, and some of them are noted here. I'm just putting it up there, so for those of you who probably don't know about it, you can look into it. And of course, they have it for Google and Azure and Kubernetes and so on and so forth. So just take a look at that. Again, it's a good starting point, but it's not the end game, and I'll tell you why. Because if you said, okay, if I implement CIS, is it going to protect my S3 bucket? The answer is no, because I believe there's like 6 or 7 rules for S3 in the CIS domain. Now, look at all these rules here. If you really want to protect S3 bucket, you would have to write 23 rules, 23 policies. You have to implement this and run it at scale and then be able to grade it, risk high, medium, low, and then get to those 50 buckets out of 800 that are at risk. That's why, and that's what you need to do. And we have listed these security policies for you, for you to write. And if you Google them, you could probably find them on the internet, and definitely kind of pick from there as well. Same thing. If you were to say, how do we govern our VPC? Okay, this is our perimeter. Well, same way, you got to write these policies. Are there unused VPC internet gateways? Are there VPC peering going on across AWS accounts? Are the flow logs enabled for the VPC subnets? All these things you need to write. Yes, you can go into VPC and turn on CloudTrail, CloudWatch, AWS config, and all those things. Those are great, and you should be doing that. But keep in mind, it's going to generate findings, and these custom rules are going to generate findings, and you need to be able to consolidate those findings. So, and that kind of takes us to the next slide of consolidation and creating that risk rating process and pass fail process for your governance model. This is important because, or else, like they say in Texas, it's the OK corral. Like anything goes. Like anything goes. Security is not anything goes. Security is a well thought out principle, and there's a defense in depth in place for a reason, and there's governance, risk, and compliance there for a reason. So it starts here. So I'm going to take my pointer again. So you start from here, the easy stuff, which is infrastructure logs, config, CloudTrail, all that stuff. You can just go turn that on. Guard duty, security hub, any cloud vendor provided tools, which I listed earlier, you should go turn that on. That's pretty easy to do. Same thing with cloud service logs, like S3 logs, RDS logs, and so on. Turn them on because it's going to tell you what's going on in your infrastructure. Uh, on your host level, okay, host-based logs, server logs, audit logs, application logs, turn them on. That's also fairly easy to do, but it does generate a lot of data, which is fine. Um, the log files can be analyzed fairly quickly with some log tools. Okay, that's fairly easy to do. The hardest area that you're going to find here, which requires a lot of expertise, time, and effort, is this machine metadata and related configurations for your cloud services. So as I mentioned, the S3 bucket has 23 security policies, right? That's what we're getting here, because Amazon does not ship those policies to you. You have to write them. Okay. Same thing with Azure, Azure policy in Azure, and same thing with GCP. So again, there's few vendors which I called out um, in that chart, where at the very bottom you saw a row that says governance, risk, and compliance, and risk prioritization and automation. None of those capabilities really cloud vendors are providing. So there's few vendors I listed like Prisma, Dome9, Cloudnosys, and Lacework are the ones that are doing this work very, very extensively, including us. So we pull all this together, or you should put all this together, I should say, and have your policy analysis for governance, and then be able to create your pass fail and rate those risks high, medium, low. Okay, it's important, because without that, you're just not going to go anywhere. And the outcome of that, okay, the output should look something like this. If you were to map that to a compliance framework, and that says, hey, for GDPR Article 25, we have 29 passing and 100 failing. Okay, so it's a total of 129 services that we checked, and this is the output that we got. So this is the kind of report that you need to generate for business folks. And underneath those findings, there's the risk prioritization going on, high, medium, low, and you should be able to use that to prioritize your remediation flow. So a quick summary of everything I discussed, and I mentioned those 6 points, right? I'm not going to read out these 6 bullets, but at the bottom you can see I have kind of summarized it. 20 security rules for each layer. Enforce and audit. Okay, make sure that it's running. It's going to generate findings. You need to consolidate those findings. Then you need to put them into a risk register or risk classification. Okay, that's a one-time event. Same thing, you need to map it to a compliance framework. It's a one-time event. And then most important of all, disseminate to application owners, project owners. Okay, you need to make them responsible. Security is a shared model now, right? Which we say, but we don't do. I mean, we say it, but we don't really do it. So again, keep that in mind. Okay, so that brings up to our platform real quick. So I'm only going to spend like 3 minutes real quick, and then dive into Q&A session. Okay, so again, we are a software company that provides a platform for companies that are looking to improve their security posture, create guardrails, create automation, create these playbooks to run their cloud at scale with full security. So we're providing continuous security scanning, compliance, alert on vulnerabilities, and of course audit reports. And then remediation is a big thing for us with automated playbooks. And three core principles that we work with is visibility, governance, and compliance. And I talked about visibility is not just saying, yeah, I have an asset list. No, it means, do you know the configurations on that asset? And do you know the risk rating on that asset, right? Governance is about policies and guardrailing. This is what our capability looks like. Okay, so it's a dashboard that gets generated for you on the fly when you scan the first time. You can filter by accounts and groups and all kinds of filtering is available. But it puts in your risk in towers, network, compute, storage, and IAM, and it tells you what the risks are, and it's also rated as high, medium, low, and you can actually go ahead and remediate accordingly. There's also a compliance dashboard, so we take those findings and map it into compliance. How well are you complying to NIST or HIPAA or PCI and so on? That's all noted here. And one of the most important part of any cloud security capability is to be able to provide automation so you can fix those findings. Okay, the findings are high risk, then there's a playbook that you can attach to it and it will run automatically behind it. And the playbooks could be fully configured to your enterprise rules. Hey, if an S3 is not encrypted, what do we need to do? Who do we need to send a ticket for? Who we need to notify? And if he doesn't respond back in 5 minutes from Slack, we're going to go ahead and make that S3 bucket, encrypted. So kind of like a nice workflow with lots of capabilities. So we provide that as well in our platform. We have already mapped all the compliance rules for our security policies. Okay, that's the activity that I was telling you about that you should be doing. And of course, all the compliance reporting and functions we have in place. And it generates pretty cool reports for executive management, for CISOs, and for auditors, and for your end customers. So with that, any questions, comments? Again, it was pretty fast in 36 minutes, but we like to keep it simple around 30 minutes. I probably went over 6, but that's okay. Okay, I'm going to open the floor for questions. Okay, question around, um, how do we build our policies, and what's our methodology around that? Well, we use 4 principles. So we take the best practices of the cloud vendor as the guiding light. Those are our North Stars. Second one, we look at the CIS compliance. Okay, so we have coded all those rules. The third one is we look at the compliance frameworks themselves. What are they asking for? And what are the gaps between the cloud vendor and the CIS? So we fill that. Okay, 3. And a fourth one is there are always novel ways that people are getting into the cloud environment and hacking in. So we also look for those and actually compile all those and bring it in. And that's how we kind of build our and of course customer feedback is it's always there. Okay. You guys probably already know we offer 14-day free trials. You guys could just go ahead and sign up and run a scan on the environment and generate a full governance risk report and be able to understand
14-day free
where
trials.
you are on your security posture. Okay. Any other questions, comments?